10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for being here. If you are new to 10-Minute Murder, be sure you subscribe right now before we get started so that you don't miss any future episodes. You can also connect with me on social media, and if you listen on Apple, a 5-star review goes a long way to help this podcast grow and reach more and more people like you and me that are interested in our little world of weird, the world of true crime. Now, today's story. You know those cases that are just so awful and incomprehensible that they stay with you? You think about them at random times later on? The murder of Shanda Sharer could turn into one of those situations for you. Shanda Renee Sharer was born June 6, 1979 in Pineville, Kentucky. Her parents, Stephen Sharer and Jacqueline Vaught, got divorced when Shanda was just a child. Shanda was best friends with her mom and close with her father and stepmother, Sharon. Shanda was the kind of girl you'd want to be friends with. She was bubbly, outgoing, and a lot of fun. At school, she was a cheerleader and played volleyball. She was smart and got good grades. In June 1991, around Shanda's 12th birthday, she and her mom moved to New Albany, Indiana, so that Shanda could see her dad more often. She started at Hazelwood Middle School in New Albany. Early on in the school year, she got into a fight with a 14-year-old named Amanda Heverin. The two ended up in detention together, where they resolved their issues and became friends. Jackie, Shanda's mother, was unsettled by the friendship. Since it began, Shanda's grades were slipping, and she was getting into trouble. The friendship soon developed into more, and the two girls began exchanging love letters. In October, they attended a school dance where they encountered Amanda's ex-girlfriend, 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace. The sight of Shanda and Amanda together made Melinda furious. At the dance, Melinda tried to fight Shanda, but Amanda stopped her. In the following weeks, Melinda threatened Shanda in public and began to write letters to Amanda saying she wanted Shanda dead. On discovering Amanda's letters to Shanda, many of which were sexually explicit in nature, Jackie and Stephen decided to have Shanda transferred to a different school. Shanda and Amanda had not broken up when she transferred. Amanda continued to write letters to Shanda and call her at home. Shanda, however, was distracted with her new school and not as responsive as Amanda would have liked. This is where the story takes a very dark turn. What appeared to be just a jealous lover's spat that spiraled into something much more sinister and malicious. It would result in an evil act that would massively alter the lives of 4 people and end the life of another. Before we go into what happened on January 10th, 1992, let's quickly talk about the people involved. 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace. Her parents had an open relationship and would on regular occasion engage in orgies. Her father was physically abusive, drunk, and shared a bed with Melinda until she was 14. She struggled with depression, did poorly in school, and was very open with her lesbian orientation, which was rare in a small town in the early 90s. 17-year-old Lori Tackett. Lori was from Madison, Indiana, about 50 miles from New Albany. She came from a strict, fundamentalist Christian household. Lori's parents were both abusive, and child services visited the home several times. Lori was fascinated by paranormal activity and vampirism. In early 1991, at the age of 16, Lori began to self-harm, which landed her in the hospital several times. 15-year-old Hope Rippey. Hope was from Madison and friends with Lori. However, her parents didn't like Hope spending time with Lori. Hope and Tony Lawrence had been close since they were very young, and Hope was also known to self-harm. 15-year-old Tony Lawrence. Tony was also born and raised in Madison. She was good friends with Hope and didn't know the other girls. On the evening of the 10th, Lori, Hope, and Tony piled into Lori's car, planning to go to a concert. This would be the first time Tony would meet Lori. Lori didn't look or act like a regular 90s teenage girl. She had a harsh, white blonde, boyish haircut and wore black from head to toe. She had a sinister and unapproachable exterior and showed little emotion. Tony was immediately unsettled by Lori. Lori asked Hope, "Did you tell her yet?" To which Hope replied, "Tell her what?" "We're going to kill a girl tonight." Tony didn't know what to think. She thought it was some kind of twisted joke. Before heading to the concert, Lori drove to New Albany to pick up Melinda. Carrying a large kitchen knife with her, she got in the car and told Hope and Tony about how she wanted to scare this girl, Shanda, because she was trying to be like her and had stolen her girlfriend. Keep in mind, Shanda is just 12 years old. The four arrived around 8 p.m. at Shanda's house, and Melinda hid. She knew that if Shanda saw her, she would get scared and refuse to come. Lori and Melinda told Hope and Tony to go knock on Shanda's door and ask her to come with them to see Amanda. Shanda had never seen Hope or Tony before, but she wanted to see Amanda. She told them to come back at midnight once her parents were asleep. They got back in the car and the four girls drove to the concert. Around 12 a.m., they drove back to Shanda's house. On the way, Melinda exclaimed how excited she was to kill Shanda, but also said she just wanted to scare her. Hope and Tony didn't believe that Melinda planned to kill the girl, but Tony was becoming increasingly concerned. She refused to go to the door with Hope this time to lure Shanda to the car. Hope returned with Shanda and they got in the car. Hope explained to Shanda that Amanda was waiting for them at the witch's castle in Utica. Suddenly, Melinda jumped up from behind Shanda, grabbed her by the hair, and put the blunt end of the knife to her throat. Shanda screamed and pleaded with Melinda not to hurt her. She told her to shut up and asked Shanda about her sexual relationship with Amanda. They arrived at the witch's castle, which, by the way, the witch's castle is an old ruined stone house in the middle of the woods that people claim is haunted. They tied Shanda up. Lori scared Shanda by telling her all about how this place was full of dead people. Shanda, terrified at this point, begged to go home. Lori lit a t-shirt with a smiley face on fire with a cigarette lighter and taunted Shanda, saying soon she would be the one burning. The girls then left the witch's castle, dragging Shanda along with them. They then drove around some more and ended up in the woods not too far from Lori's house. Here, the torture began. Lori and Melinda punched and kicked Shanda and tried to cut her throat with a knife, but it wasn't sharp enough. They used it to stab her chest and stomach. Hope and Tony stayed in the car, although Hope got out of the car briefly to restrain Shanda. Melinda and Lori strangled Shanda with a rope until she passed out. They then put her in the trunk and drove back to Lori's house. They told Hope and Tony that Shanda was dead. When Lori realized Shanda was making noise, she went back out to the car and stabbed her until she was quiet. They then drove to Lori's house, where they left Hope and Tony. Melinda and Lori went driving on some nearby back roads with Shanda still in the trunk of the car. Whenever Shanda made noise, Lori would go round to the trunk, where she would stab her with a knife and beat her with a tire iron. It's not clear for how long they were out driving. They returned to Lori's house, picked up Hope and Tony, and then drove back to the woods. Lori and Melinda wanted to show Hope and Tony what they had done to Shanda, but Tony refused to look. The three girls looked, and Hope sprayed Shanda with Windex. She said, "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" At a gas station, Tony bought a large bottle of Pepsi to drink, but Lori grabbed it, emptied it, and began filling it with gasoline. They drove north and ended up on Lemon Road, a country road surrounded by fields. Lori and Hope wrapped Shanda, who is still alive, somehow, in a blanket and carried her to the edge of the fields, still in view from the road. Lori poured gasoline from the Pepsi bottle on Shanda and set her on fire. The four girls left and went to eat at McDonald's. Tony was hysterical and used a payphone to call a friend and tell her about the murder. Melinda and Lori decided Tony needed to go home. After dropping Tony and Hope off at their homes, Melinda got in touch with Amanda and told her that Shanda was dead. Amanda didn't believe it and agreed to meet her later. Lori and Melinda went to pick up Amanda, then returned to Melinda's house. Once inside, Melinda cried hysterically, telling Amanda what they had done to Shanda. Amanda still didn't believe it, but this changed when they showed her the trunk of Lori's car. The interior was soaked with blood. There were bloody handprints, long, curly, dark hairs, and one of Shanda's socks. Amanda was horrified and demanded to be taken home. Around the time that the girls were at McDonald's, two brothers out hunting for quail spotted a large, dark-colored object on the side of the road. As they got closer, thinking it was a blow-up doll, They realized it was the burned body of a young woman. They went back home and called police. About 12 p.m., police arrived to discover Shanda's burned body in a posed sexual position. In the meantime, Steve, Shanda's father, woke up. He noticed that Shanda was not in her room, but didn't think much of it. He assumed she was still asleep downstairs. When he realized she wasn't there, he began to worry. Around 8:20 p.m., a hysterical Tony entered the police station with her father. She told them everything she knew. Dental records were used to positively identify the body as Shanda's. All 4 girls were charged as adults. They each accepted plea bargains to avoid the death penalty. Lori and Melinda were both sentenced to 60 years in Indiana Women's Prison. On appeal in 2004, Hope's sentence was reduced from 60 to 35 years. Tony pled guilty to 1 charge of criminal confinement and was sentenced to a maximum of 20 years. Tony was released on parole in 2000 after serving 8 years. Hope was released on parole in 2006, having served 14 years. On the 26th anniversary of Shanda's death, January 11, 2018, Lori was released on parole. Melinda was released in September of 2019. That's today's 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed so that you get the episodes as soon as they are released, and you don't miss any. Today's story was researched and written by Natalie from Talk Murder With Me. There's so much more to this story, and if you go to Natalie's website, you can read more about what went on in this case, the aftermath, as well as see visuals of every person involved and Witch's Castle that I mentioned. TalkMurderWithMe.com is the website. I'll put a link in the show notes of this episode and also connect you to where you can find Talk Murder With Me on social media. And again, a huge thank you to Natalie from Talk Murder With Me for collaboration on this episode. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Murder. Have a good night.